Thank you. Item 4.
Approval of the minutes from July 26, 2022.
Is there any discussion by the board on the minutes?
Yes. An item that I brought up at the last minutes, I think that it was mischaracterized in the statement, item 12. And I have spoken to the manager about it and our leader, and they disagree with me, but it was my intent to bring up the issue of the recent rate increase proposal for Great Basin Water was to have the manager write a letter to express our concern that the new proposed water rate was it was skewed more towards a fixed fee and not a use fee, which is inconsistent with our goal to reduce water use within Pahrump Valley, which is an oversubscribed basin. So I asked and I talked to Mr. Meeks about this, and we would like to, or I would like to bring it back at the next meeting with a proposed letter to present to the board, and if the board approves it, then we would send it to the PUC to express our concerns about.
Mr. Holden, do you have anything to talk about to the minutes?
Well, that's the minutes. I think was mischaracterized it, but.
I'm sorry.
Excuse me, if I may. Mr. Holden, we're here to approve the minutes and actually to approve the agenda. And in doing so, I would remind you that I took the time to review the minutes on tape, and I think the minutes depict to that, but I will ask for a question from any of the board members and a statement on approval of the agenda.
Yes, Chair, we need to stick with just an approval of the agenda that's in front of you.
Thank you.
My apologies.
I make a motion that we
I think that's
approve.
what I just said.
Approve what? The agenda?
No, on matters of the agenda, I apologize for the discrepancy. That was entirely my error. As to the agenda, we need to address number 17 first, and then we can move through the agenda items. But
Thank you. Would you move to agenda item 17?
item number 17 for possible action, discussion, deliberation, and decision regarding election of new water board officers for fiscal year 22-23.
A. Is there a motion for the chair?
I would like to motion Helene Williams for the chair.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor? I will poll the board. Mr. Goodhart?
Aye.
Mr. Holden?
Aye.
Mr. Jackson? Mr. Locke?
Aye.
Thank you. Mrs. Williams? I'll abstain. Do I need a 5-0 for that? I don't believe so. Thank you. B, Vice Chair. Is there a motion for Vice Chair?
I'd like the motion for Mr. Goodhart.
There's a motion. Is there a second?
I'll second it.
There's a second. I'll poll the board. Mr. Holden?
Aye.
Mr. Jackson? Mr. Locke? Mrs. Williams is aye. And Mr. Goodhart?
I can vote for myself?
You can.
Oh, aye.
Item C, Secretary Treasurer. Is there a motion for Secretary Treasurer?
Actually, I have a question on this. Not a motion, but I think most of those duties are done by the county or the general manager. I'm not exactly sure what the Secretary or Treasurer would be doing as a board member. Mr. Weeks might be able to help fill in some of that, because last time we brought this to a vote, nobody really wanted to do that. And so I'm trying to figure out how we, what this really entails.
So, Mr. Locke, statutorily, a lot of what the secretary does is composes the minutes. And as far as from my desk, it really helps me to stay on task and know what happened during the course of the minutes. So as far as the manager is concerned, continuing to do the duties of the secretary is actually advantageous for my office.
And with that being said, the county handles most of the paperwork. The treasurer actually just reviews the documents when necessary. If Mr. Holden would have no problem with that and there is a motion, Mr. Holden, would that be acceptable?
To be the treasurer?
Yes.
Yes.
Thank you. Mr. Locke, your motion?
I'd like to make a motion for Mr. Holden to be the treasurer.
Is there a second?
Second.
Poll the board. Mr. Goodhart?
Aye.
Mr. Jackson? Mr. Locke?
Aye.
Mrs. Williams is aye. Mr. Goodhart, Mr. Holden.
Abstain.
Thank you, Mr. Holden. Motion carries. All motions carried. Thank you. Moving back to item 5. Thank you.
Opening general public comment. Up to 3 minutes per person on matters not listed on the agenda. Action will be not taken on matters considered during this period.
Is there anyone that would like to speak to the board under this agenda item? Is there anyone in Tonopah?
I think we.
Excuse me, before we move forward with public comment, Madam Chair, can I get a motion for the approval of the agenda?
Oh,
number
thank you.
4.
I apologize.
We reopen
Approval of
number
the
4.
agenda. Is there a motion for approval of the agenda?
I move that we approve the agenda for July 26th.
Is there a second?
I'll second that. I'll second it.
Thank you. Motion and second. Mr. Goodhart,
Aye.
Mr. Holden,
Aye.
Mr. Jackson, Mr. Locke,
Aye.
Mrs. Williams is aye. Motion approved. Back to item 5.
Item 5, opening public comment.
Would you give your name and spell your last name, sir?
Yes, my name is Victor Fuentes, Fuentes. And I'm coming before the board today because after more than 14 years, we've been dealing with this situation in our camp, and Fishing Wildlife violating our water right that was approved by the state engineer. And we are trying, we try to give them a time and for them to correct their mistake, and they haven't been willing to. So Saturday, July 30, at 7 a.m., we're going to proceed to put the channel back that they unlawfully stole from us. And here, I want to give the board my water permit, my approval for the state engineer. Also, a warning notice sent from the state engineer to Fishing Wildlife to put the water back, and they haven't been willing to do it. And you're going to see on the bottom right here, state that I have a senior vested water right for Ash Meadows, and also Fishing Wildlife do not have any right in the Carson Slough. The only right that they have in the Carson Slough was canceled in 1996. You're going to see that here, state by the state engineer. So they don't have no right to move the Carson Slough. They have no right to touch it, and they did it illegally and unlawfully. And then, and this other document, you're going to see the 1866 July Act granting me a easement for me to maintain my channel over public lane approved by Congress. You're going to find that mark over here in this page. It's marked right there. So what we're going to do Saturday is not illegal. It's according to the law. Then the next bunch of document is a well-documented violation. Every time that we have no water, every time the system failed, it's documented over here until the month of July. Okay? So you guys can see it here, all the violation. And according to the warning notice, every violation, okay, the state engineer are supposed to charge Fishing Wildlife up to $10,000, and they haven't done it. You're going to see all of the violations right here. And then I have application 53613 under Fish and Wildlife Service, in which they are supposed to be delivering water for 6.9 acres on my land. Okay? And I also have a market over here, and they haven't done it. And the state engineer know about this, and they haven't done anything. So what that tells me is that the state engineer is not working in the favor of the citizens of Nye County. Okay? It's working on the favor of the federal government. They are an extension of the federal government. Okay? They're not helping us. So Saturday, you all are invited to come to the open of the channel, to the return of the Carson Slough back to their original place. Thank you, and God bless you.
What time on Saturday?
7 a.m. 7 a.m. We're going to start with a prayer, pledge of allegiance to the American flag. The commissioner, they're going to be there, Donna Cox and all. They're going to do a brief speech. Also, Sharon Worley is in complete support. She's going to be there personally with some of her deputy, and we're going to do the job. And you all are invited. After that, we're going to have tacos. Thank you.
Do you have the manpower and equipment to take on that rather significant challenge?
Some of them. Yeah. Thank you.
Yes, I'd like to remind the board that our staff, Mr. Weeks, will be present representing the board. Thank you. Is there anyone else that would like to speak under public comment? Seeing none, we'll close public comment and move to item 6.
Number 6, board comments.
I have one, if I may. I'd like to try a little something different with the board on the action items. I'd like to be able to give the opportunity to each board member to state a conflict of interest if they have it on that item, rather than the basic overall conflict of interest disclosure statement at the beginning. If this doesn't work, we'll go back to the disclosure statement at the beginning. Thank you. Does any board member have anything they'd like to add to item number 7? Anything for the next board meeting?
Proposals for new agenda items.
Do those have to be submitted now, or can we, if in the next day or two after the meeting we have an idea, we can still present it to Mr. Weeks to include, or does that have to be noticed here at this meeting?
This would be the appropriate time to propose new agenda items, but of course my office is open and willing to work with all the board members to satisfy your needs. But if you have ideas for board or for future agenda items, this would be the appropriate time to address them.
Okay, in that regards, have we had an opportunity to request that the state send one of the representatives to give us more detail in the specifics of how they're going to administrate ruling 1330?
A specific request has not been made.
Okay, then I would make I would like to have that on our next agenda, that we make a specific request to the State Water Engineer's Office to have a senior level basin engineer from.
Is that not item 10?
Yes, it is.
Thank you.
Okay.
We can discuss that then. Thank you. Thank you, Commissioner. Anybody else have anything?
Yes, I would.
Mr. Holden, could you pull the mic maybe a little closer to you, and that way?
I would like to put on the next agenda a discussion and vote on a proposal for solar projects in oversubscribed basins within Nye County, and to add a requirement that the solar projects obtain water rights for cleaning their solar panels, and that they obtain 4 water rights for each one used, and that the extra 3 are retired when the project is approved.
Okay, and would you submit that documentation to the manager in an appropriate time so that it can be placed on the agenda item?
Yes.
Thank you. Any other members? Any other items, Mr. Holden?
No.
Thank you. Any other board members?
Yeah, I have one. Relating to sending the state engineer a letter, I don't believe that the state engineer's office is looking kindly on Nye County right now. It's my understanding because we haven't paid a bill that we owe them. I think we should have an agenda item to discuss Nye County paying that bill that is being held at the treasurer's office right now, and go into a little more detail as to why we are treated slightly different than every other basin. And it's my understanding that came from 1293, which was directed by the Board of County Commissioners to the state engineer. So I would like to have an agenda item where we discuss that and give our recommendation to the Board of County Commissioners in, regarding paying that bill or not paying that bill, if that's what we choose to tell them, so that we can get a line of communication going with the state engineer's office.
I'm clear.
Thank you. Any other member? I just have one comment. I read a newspaper article that was sent to me in the mail, and it's rather interesting. It discusses what California is going to be doing with domestic wells. And basically, they are going to set up a process where fees are paid. The base filing fee is $300 per well, which all extractors are required to report. There'll be an additional $10 per acre foot if you have a meter. If you don't have a meter, it'll be $25, and it'll be a $25 per month late fee. California is moving in a very unusual direction, and being a neighbor, I think we need to keep an eye on that. So if staff feels that there's necessity to have that on the agenda, we can do so. We can talk about it later. Thank you. And we'll close item 7 and move forward to item 8.
Actually, we need to close out 7 and get a vote on the minutes.
I thought we did vote on the minutes. I apologize. Do I have a motion to approve the minutes
From June 21.
for June 21?
I make a motion to approve the minutes from June 21.
Thank you. Is there a second?
I'll second the motion.
Thank you. And poll the board. Mr. Goodhart,
Shall we have public comment?
is there any public comment on the minutes? Seeing none, I'll close public comment on that item and bring it back to the board. Mr. Goodhart,
Aye.
Mr. Holden,
Nay.
Mr. Jackson, Mr. Locke,
Aye.
Mrs. Williams, aye. It's 4-1.
Number 8.
Item number 7.
8. Item number 8.
8, sorry.
Presentation only. Presentation by Beck Environmental Incorporated on how the company may be able to assist the Water District to secure grant funding.
Good morning, Madam Chair, and thank you, board members, for having us here. I wanted to thank Board Member Locke for inviting us. My name is Eileen Christensen, for the record, Christensen. I am the president and principal of BEC, or Beck Environmental. We're an environmental consulting group that has a multidiscipline team. We were established in 2002, and actually our first client was Nye County, developing a brownfields grant for the county that we've since assisted the county in growing from that time frame. Again, we are a multidiscipline team, but a lot of the services we provide include site characterization, planning and community support, permitting and compliance monitoring, NEPA analysis, natural resource studies, and brownfields program management. the key component to brownfields in many cases is application of grants for funding to complete various projects. Oh, sorry. Okay. So many of our clients include local government as well as private industry personnel. And some of the programs that we've worked on in the past include the statewide brownfields and statewide wellhead protection and integrated source water protection programs. Throughout the experience we've had, we've worked with a number of different communities to develop grant applications, but the key success that we've found, the key to success is working with boards who have established plans and have identified goals and objectives they want to achieve. Once we understand what those goals and objectives are, it's much easier to go after funding that can support those goals and objectives. So what we're here for mainly is to find out what your goals and objectives are. We understand that it's a county-wide program, and we want to make sure that you're aware that we do have the capacity to write grants on from a number of different federal and state programs. And we've been successful to date, about $17.1 million to support various Nye County programs and other community programs. Amberly Mahaffey from our office has done some research, and I wanted to introduce her so she could give an overview of some of the grants that are a possibility in the future.
Again, my name is Amberly Mahaffey. That's Mahaffey. And some of the grant opportunities that I have found, there's various ones that are offered from the government, state funding, those kinds of agencies. Some of them are for pre-development, depending on where plans are in the making of certain counties, certain parts, communities in the county. There are water and waste disposal loans and grants available as well, and these are all mostly through the USDA, and these are available year-round. There's also grants called the Water Smart grants, and these can help with water conservation. If you are looking to help communities save water, this grant is also available. There's grants available for utility companies that they can apply for these grants as well, to help them within smaller communities, help those communities thrive. There are grants available for emergency funding if communities are suffering from the drought or having any kind of hardships from earthquakes or anything like that. There are grants that are available to help for that. There are state revolving loan funds that are offered through NDEP, the Nevada Department of Environmental Protection. Congress passed a law called the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law in March that helps support some of these loans, revolving loan funds for the clean water and drinking water. There's also a WIFIA grant that is also offered as part of this bipartisan law. WIFIA, it basically is it's an open loan that kind of helps with any kind of planning, pre-development, construction, depending on anywhere in your project of where you are.
Given the number of grants that are available and the number of different funding opportunities, there are loans, there are grants, there are combinations, there's a loan forgiveness program. Many of these things are open to you. It's just a matter of understanding what exactly you are looking for. So I know you're still a new board and you're still forming, but it sounds like you are moving in a positive direction, and as you have the need, we would love to be able to service what those needs are. We don't want to submit a proposal until we know exactly what you're looking for, because unless you want us to do research on a general basis. So do you have any questions, or is there anything that we can answer in the meantime?
Any board members have any questions?
Yes, I have a question. You mentioned water conservation. So if we wanted to start a program for home energy, or I want to say energy, water conservation items such as, replacing old toilets, low flow, shower heads, you name it. There's a whole bunch of those. When you say there might be funding available for such a program, could you explain that a little bit more? How much do you think is available, and, what would it apply to in that kind of area?
Whenever we do a grant, we try to understand exactly what the project is. So in this case, if you're looking at water conservation measures, in order to be successful, generally you have to have a community outreach or a stakeholder engagement program tied to those so that people know that the funding's available. A number of communities get grant applications and grant funding to provide cost-saving measures, but they never are able to get the word out to the community to let them know that the funding is available or what they'll have to do in order to access that funding. Because the challenge with just making it available without having some kind of a process for evaluating applications means you don't know that the funding is going to the people that you're actually targeting. So part of it is one of the things we encourage is establishing a program where you establish what the milestones are for that program. For example, putting together the community outreach program, establishing the rules or regulations that you want followed in order to access that funding for residents, or what the criteria are going to be for distributing the funding. And then having the component where you actually have the parts and pieces. Are you going to be purchasing the material, or are you going to be giving them funding and getting them to reimbursing them for monies that they've spent on that program? All of that has to be thought through. And generally, that process needs to happen before you apply for the grant so that the granting authority knows what your process is going to entail. So that's part of what we do, is once we understand what you want to do, we can put together an approach and then identify grants that potentially could meet that approach. And then if you approve it, we can go forward with the application. That's the way that we would anticipate this going.
Thank you.
So this is Mr. Lockup in Tonopah. I asked Eileen to come here and present before us because I've known her for about 15 years, I would say, and watched her be successful in getting funding for a lot of projects that would have never got off the ground in northern Nye County and some in southern Nye County, but I really had seen them in northern Nye County. And at this point in time, the federal government has been throwing money to the states and to a lot of projects. And I think we would be remiss when looking at our budget of approximately $350,000 a year not to go after additional funding for a number of things that we could direct them to go look for. Because, with $350,000 a year, we're not going to be able to do anything major with the monies that we have, but we could work projects through a number of those different funds that she was showing, and or do some public, private, and have her direct us on the best way to try and get these grants. Eileen, if you could explain a little bit more to the board your stepped approach to doing these grants. It's not just that we're going to go, yes, we can get this, and here's a bunch of money, go try and get it, and then that you see if we qualify at the beginning from just looking at the 30,000-foot view, and then we keep on whittling our way down. So we only put money into it as we keep on going through the stages, getting closer to getting the grant.
Generally, when we understand what project or what opportunity you'd like to pursue, or what specific objective you have that you want met, we can identify, we put together a crosswork of funding. So we take a look at what you need, what you want accomplished, the steps that it's going to take to get there, which grants are most appropriate for each step, so that you can essentially take a stepwise approach to accomplishing your objective. But in addition to identifying those steps and seeing what grants potentially you can qualify for, what we do is we don't recommend you go after a grant unless you have at least a 75% chance of success. If you don't have a chance of success, there's no sense in spending the money to go after a grant. Once you've achieved each step, or once you've identified the funding mechanisms, you also have to put that in line with a milestone schedule so that you know when different grants are going to be coming in, how that's going to accomplish each set. So it's kind of a mini plan of how to get your project or your objective accomplished successfully within a specific time frame. Because if you don't establish a time frame, how can you measure your level of success? You need to accomplish your milestones within your schedule to complete the project successfully. So that's essentially the approach we take. And then for each, we can even, what we've done with Nye County in the past is they give us a list of different projects they'd like to accomplish. And we just keep an eye out for different grants and see if something comes up that helps accomplish one of those objectives. And then where we see something coming in a timely manner, we let you know ahead of time so that you have plenty of time. It takes, in some cases, especially for larger grants, several months to complete because you have to go through the public process. So we'll also tell you, okay, this is how long it will probably take you to get the funding you need to accomplish each component of the objective. Does that help with the outline and in the approach?
Yes, it does. It's my belief that we should be doing the same thing that Nye County's doing, that we should have you with eyeballs on grants that are coming up or the yearly timeframes on grants, and we should be giving you a list of things such as what Mr. Holden discussed. It's never going to hurt us to get better flushing toilets, lower flow, any kind of faucet in our town. And if there's a grant to help do that, that's something we should be going after. I mean, I think that our basin probably falls into the higher category of need when it comes to water issues than most basins in Nevada.
Okay, we can put together a proposal to take that approach to start obtaining information from you on what grants you're interested in. But we also need to find out if different programs are specific to this basin or if you're looking at a countywide approach. That would be helpful. Are you mainly focused in the Pahrump Basin, or are you looking at countywide?
The majority of our focus has been in the past on Basin 162, the Pahrump Basin, it's often called. But we represent the whole Nye County, and there's 44 basins, I believe, there. So one question I do have, a lot of grants come with matched funds. Are most of these grants under that category, or is there the ability to build into the grant the cost that the county or the board would be facing?
Each grant's a little bit different, and most grants want to see some skin in the game. They want to see something contributed from the grantee. It isn't necessarily a direct dollar match. Sometimes it's just showing that board members or volunteers are willing to put in time. So, for example, one of the grants that we've worked on is for the Choir Association in White Pine County. They are a nonprofit board, and the way that they're meeting their match for the majority is they're tracking time that each of the volunteers spends in meetings, discussing the items, and then that volunteer time has a dollar value assigned. So every time they finish a meeting, they sign a sheet saying these are the hours that were expended. Then we allocate the dollar amount per volunteer, and we track that in a timely manner. Or they track that because part of that tracking helps complete their match as well. Sometimes you can use, for example, one of the projects we did was the Pink Motel, and one of the match elements there was the county waived the cost of tipping fees for the building to be put into the landfill, and that helped them meet that match. There's a lot of different ways that you can accomplish things, and it doesn't necessarily have to come out of pocket. Sometimes we've also had success in working two different programs at the same time. For example, CDBG funding is one of the few programs that you can actually use to match federal dollars. So as long as you know your project, you can build your funding around your project needs and what your expenditures need to be, what your limits are from a budget standpoint. I mean, everything has to work within your budget, so part of our job is to make sure that you understand what not only what the matching requirements are, but what the other elements are, the reporting. There's a lot of other things that go into, especially federal grants, that you'll want to be aware of before you apply for them.
Yeah, I've been dealing with grants since 1986, so I understand, and they've changed a lot in those years, absolutely, especially funding from the federal government with super funds and so forth. Thank you. Any questions from the board? Thank you so much for your presentation.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and board members, thank you.
Item number 9.
Item number 9, Madam Chair, this item should have been pulled from the agenda during number 4. I would ask that we move on to number 10, or we can open it and let the presentation die. There'll be no presentation made today.
I'd like to comment, if I may. The very first board meeting that we had, I believe it was May.
Did you read the item?
Excuse me. Item number 9, presentation only. Presentation by Nye County resident John Basta that the board consider changes in the operating procedures of the district.
Before the meeting in May, Mr. Basta was demanding that the board was in violation of the open meeting law and wanted to discuss the bylaws. And I sat down with Mr. Basta right here and told him that he needs to approach this as a positive direction and that he could bring it to the board under an agenda item. Mr. Basta suggested to Mr. Weeks, when he had a conversation with Mr. Weeks, that he would bring that item forward. And I told Mr. Basta that he must produce the documentation for the backup material. That was not done at the last meeting, so it was not placed on the agenda. Well, the item changed from the bylaws to Dillon's rule. Now the item has changed to changes in the operating procedures of the district. The backup information was not presented by Mr. Basta, and Mr. Basta's not here. So this is an update, and I'll close that item out, and we'll move to item 10.
Item number 10 for discussion only. Discussion and deliberation regarding the petition and signatures gathered and then submitted by certified mail to the Nevada State Engineer as public comment to order number 1330, which affects Nevada Water Basin number 230, also known as the Amargosa Desert.
Okay, I had requested that this item be brought forth today for discussion purposes. I believe we have, what had happened was back probably 15 or 20 years ago, we had a ruling 1197, which then later became 1197A and then 1197B. Basically, the crux of those original orders from the state engineer's office, they have not been upheld in a court of law, so they have not been adjudicated. So far, they're an open order without any adjudication proceedings to validate their lawfulness. But what it does is it restricts the water use and the water transfer within the Amargosa hydrographic basin with the stated purpose of protecting the levels of Devil's Hole pupfish. And what it does is it established a 10-mile buffer zone around Devil's Hole, arbitrary 10 miles, that said no wells could be drilled and no water could be moved within a 10-mile radius of Devil's Hole. And within a 40-mile radius of Devil's Hole, that any water that moved had to go ahead and be evaluated through a rather complicated TICE formula, which they've still been unable to provide any clear guidance of how it actually affects the amount of water they allow to be transferred. So basically how it works out in the real world, if neighbor A wants to sell water to neighbor B, and neighbor B happens to be a half a mile closer to Devil's Hole, they could be 25 miles from Devil's Hole, and you'd have to submit the application, wait sometimes months, sometimes years, until they say they've got a chance to, in the back room, wash it against the model and see how much water the state's going to take away from you. In one case, a gentleman wanted to move it 0.2 of a mile closer, and they wanted to take 42 acre feet and chop 20 acre feet off the top of it. When asked to justify that type of taking in any type of scientific defensible format, they just said those numbers and the way that they basically make those evaluations are not open for public review. So flash forward into the year 2022. Now they want to replace this order 1197 with 1330, which once again the stated use is to protect the level of Devil's Hole from going down. But included with the packet shows that since they closed down Spring Meadows Ranch back in the late 1970s or mid 1970s, the water level has actually gone up in Devil's Hole. It's actually rebounded all the way from the 90s to the 2000s, 2010s, until there's been a little bit of a dip here recently after they had a huge earthquake event in the Richmond area. But it doesn't show that this type of order is still necessary. We had asked that they bring some clarity, because what happens is a lot of the water rights in Amargosa Valley are owned in the farming area. So to bring them next to the highway where someone could use a couple acre feet for quasi-municipal or commercial water rights to open up a business, that all comes pell-mell directly opposite Devil's Hole. Now you're moving it closer to Devil's Hole, and now you're going to be, you don't know what's going to happen. So when this thing had been given a public meeting, I think some concerned people in Amargosa Valley came up with this petition, and to best of my knowledge, they had sent it in to the state within the allowed response time, public comment period. I believe there's probably somewhere between 250 and 300 signatures, and in a valley with only 1,100 residents, that shows an overwhelming public concern. We had asked through the back door, Dan Weeks, if the state would expand their comment period to allow for more comments and allow for a little bit greater review of what exactly 1330 was going to do to 1197. And it was, I believe that our manager was told that they were not open to the idea of extending the comment period, which I felt was kind of odd since this board had just recently been reconvened, and we wanted to make sure that we got this right. And we wanted to be able to take the time, solicit the public input, solicit input actually from the State Water Engineers Office themselves, and give us an opportunity to be deliberative and weigh in on this on a very cautious but educated basis. So I brought this up because I believe that we still need to get to the bottom of what 1330 actually does. And with all of the little different meetings and whatnot, we've heard off the record, but people there, I have had 3 different witnesses tell me that the state, Adam Sullivan, a state engineer, has said that now it's going to expand that range to 40 miles completely in a radius, not just a radius taking over Amargosa Valley, but completing that entire circle, which then backs into and overlaps a good part of the northwest basin 162, the Pahrump Basin. So now you have this order which then could have very real impacts to add another layer of complexity and regulatory uncertainty over a large part of north and northwest Pahrump Basin 162. Because of that, I believe it's within our purview to request that the state send a senior representative from that basin and provide a lot more degree of clarity of how they're going to administrate 1330 and correct some of the problems of 1197, because from someone who's lived in that basin for the better part of 25 years, I can tell you that ruling 1197 literally killed hundreds of millions of dollars of economic development killed hundreds of jobs. It's been hanging, okay, over that valley and suffocating that valley now for the better part of a decade and a half. And so it's about time that we get to the bottom of exactly what it is they want to accomplish, because the last 15 years, we've been looking at the Devil's Hole pupfish level, and it's actually stayed the same or gone up. So let's have a better conversation, or a deeper conversation with the state authorities to exactly how they're going to execute this order, because they also said you could also move water if you have an offsetting move in the other direction. So in other words, if you bought water that brought you a mile closer to Devil's Hole, if you had another water right move that brought you a mile further, they could consider net offsetting impacts. Well, we know now that there's a couple thousand acre-feet of water that have been purchased by gold mines, and they're going to move those water rights to the very northwest corner of Basin 230, in some cases 20 to 30 miles further from Devil's Hole. So in conversations with the Water Engineer's Office, well, would you take that into effect if a guy wants to move 20 acre-feet a little bit closer to Devil's Hole? Well, they said it's not within their purview to aggregate where these water rights get moved one way or another. It's too much difficulty for them to say, well, these 2,000 acre-feet move 20 miles further, therefore we can move another 40 acre-feet 5 miles closer. So I think we really need to get to the bottom of this, because this goes to the crux of what this board is also about, not only about the preservation of water rights, but also about the legal lawful use of water rights, enabling legal lawful use of water rights by their legal lawful water right holders.
Madam Chair, if I may.
Yes, please.
Not to contradict anything that Mr. Goodwin just said, Goodhart just said, but a little specificity as to the extension of the window on the public comment. The Nevada State Engineer was very accommodating. They did extend in an informal manner the public comment period, which we did not utilize in submitting these signatures in regards to this item. However, the Division of Water Resources was responsive to my request for an extension in an informal fashion. Full stop on that. On the second matter, in regards to your statement, Mr. Goodhart, as to a 40-mile diameter or perimeter around Devil's Hole, this language is not in Order 1330. I've discussed the matter with Division of Resources, Water Resources. There's some confusion about this 40-mile, and I would just say that it's not in the actual document. Whether or not it's been discussed is to be debated, but it's not in the legislation. That's all I have. Thank you.
If I may, after the last meeting, when the issue of the 40-mile radius was brought to the table by several people, I requested that Manager Weeks contact DWR and request a copy of the minutes and a recording of that meeting. I think it's imperative that we take the opportunity to review those documents, because if in fact there is a 40-mile radius, we need to confirm it and we need to deal with it. So I don't believe until we get that document, we have the ability to go either way with it. Hopefully, the Department of Water Resources will supply us with that document in a timely manner so that we can adequately discuss this in the best interest of the people of Nye County.
And to piggyback on that, so that I think it even enhances the need for a better line of communication, to have a senior basin engineer representative here to tell us if it's not 40 miles, is it 20 miles, is it 25 miles? I can tell you it's 25 miles because I've seen water rights turned down 25 miles from Devil's Hole. So if it's not 40 miles, I know they're doing it on 25 miles. So let's find out what the exact mileage is. And if the fact they haven't given you mileage, they're sailing underneath this saying they're using a Death Valley Flow Model number 3 and evaluating this and that. But we know that there's an area, a distance around Devil's Hole that they're saying they're not going to approve water rights moved any closer unless there's an offsetting impact, or they can run it through a model and determined there'll be no net impacts within a 50-year time horizon. So we need to get to exactly how a person, imagine if you have water rights, you want to sell your neighbor 20 acre feet. You can't sell it to your neighbor now because, well, we could draw up the paperwork, send it to the state. It could be months or years before they get around to you, and it might be that they need half the water that you thought you bought had to be stripped away. That's not open, fair, transparent, accountable government. That is getting to the heart of unelected bureaucrats taking away personal private property rights. And I think that there's a big deal going on even in the states or in the U.S. Supreme Court about the oversized role that unelected bureaucrats are having in day-to-day matters as it affects everyday Americans and the businesses that they own and operate. So I believe that we need to get the folks down here. We need to get some clarity as to what actually this does and have some real-world specific examples. Here's a point 10.5 miles from Devil's Hole. Here's a point 20 miles from Devil's Hole. Here's a point 30 miles from Devil's Hole. In each case, say we could pick 25 acre feet, 50 or 100. What's going to be the amount that a state's going to determine needs to be taken? So we have to have some real world examples to serve as guideposts. So when people come to Amargosa Valley to invest their hard-earned money, they have a reasonable idea of what to expect from the governmental agency.
Could we get a motion, Mr. Goodhart, for staff to direct Mr. Weeks to extend a personal invitation to the Department of Water Resources to do just that?
Yeah, I make a motion.
It is only a discussion item. I apologize.
Oh, we could always make that motion at the next meeting.
Or you can, at your comments at the end, you can give him direction.
Yes.
All right,
thank
number
you.
20.
Can I ask a question? You mentioned sometime in the late 70s there was some farm that ceased using water. Can you explain that a little bit more, what that's about?
That was the original Spring Meadows Ranch, and it's going to be real quick here, but they went ahead and they were using lawful legal water rights, but they noticed there was a decline after they drilled a couple holes in close proximity to Devil's Hole. That triggered a court action underneath the Federal Endangered Species Act, which gave the federal endangered species the federally reserved water rights. So it basically, long story short, the ranch ceased operations and went out of business, and that was in the it's called a Capert decision in the early 1970s.
Any other comments by board members? And then we'll close item 10 and move to item 11.
Item number 11 for possible action, discussion and deliberation to renew and accept a modified lease agreement for required copier service from Xerox. The new lease will result in a monthly savings of $57.61 per month.
I'd like to ask the manager a question. How many copies a month are you making?
That's a good question. I haven't been in service a whole month to know, but
You know, that varies from month to month, if
An
I may,
agenda.
staff. From my experience of having been on this board, and I'm sure Mr. Goodhart will agree, and Mr. Locke, if the board packet is requested, and this is a question that really we need to discuss, do board members want a hard copy for them to have right here in the chambers? I printed out my own, and there's over 150 pages there. It doesn't particularly bother me. I have great equipment. But do you want a hard copy, or do you want to rely on your cell phones and your devices? Do you want just an agenda? Because that's going to be the impact on this copy machine. And I've seen board packets that are 6 inches to 8 inches, depending on the documentation that the board needs. So tens of thousands of copies, not a problem in the past.
I think one aspect to consider in this is the Xerox machine also functions as a security function. I create the agendas and flatten all of my PDFs through the machine. So it serves more than just copy and printing. It also serves a security function.
Any further questions from board members?
I'd like to make a motion that we accept this $57.61 monthly savings.
Thank you, Mr. Locke. Is there a second to the motion?
I second.
Thank you. There's a motion and a second. Mr. Goodhart?
I make the motion that we approve
Can we,
a renew.
public, do we have to do public? Yes, please.
Yes, certainly. We'll open for public comment. See none, we'll close public comment. Mr. Holden?
Aye.
Mr. Jackson? Mr. Locke?
Aye.
Mr. Goodhart?
Aye.
Mrs. Williams, aye. 5-0. Thank you. Item 12.
Item number 12 for discussion only. Discussion and deliberation regarding recent action taken by the Nevada Supreme Court regarding senior water rights in Eureka County and Nevada Advance Opinion number 43. Consider the potential implications in Nevada Water Basin 162 and Nye County overall.
Would anybody like to open the discussion?
Madam Chair, I put this item on the agenda just to put the decision into the record, to bring it to the public, and to bring it to the board's attention. I believe that this decision will ultimately have a significant impact in Nye County and on Basin 162.
Any comments? I'll open public comment. Is there any public comment on this item? I'll close public comment. Oh, sorry. Go ahead. Come forward. Your name, please. Spell your last name.
Victor Fuentes, Fuentes. So, you know, I have something to say. We have to be very careful with the decision of the court and today's days, because what they're doing, they're going around the Constitution to take our right away, okay? To take the right away from us. So senior reservoir right is something that is preserved by Congress, you know? And then we have these people over here changing that to accommodate their I don't know, power or whatever, if you don't mind, you know. So we have to be very careful, you know. And I said again, they're going around the Constitution, and they keep doing that to be taking our right away. Okay. And soon we're not going to have no right if we continue allowing the court to take the decision like that. So I think somehow we have to push back. Thank you.
Any comments from the board? I'll close public comment. Go ahead, Mr. Locke.
I think that all the board members, if you have not read this decision, which isn't small, really need to read it to understand all of the different nuances of it. Because, you know, there was a lot being said. There was a lot said on both sides of the aisle. And, you know, this decision focuses on, I believe, two things. It focuses on the word equity, which you can never define. You know, what is true equity, especially in dealing with this. So that's a gray area. And then it also focuses on the individuals that are in a basin, you know, as of the day that you would try and pass ordinances, and future individuals coming in. And it really separates, you know, the status quo from where it is now to where it's going to go. And really wants to protect that status quo of where it is now. But I think, you know, we need to read it, and it will have implications on Nye County. But this is something that once you're done reading it, you'll understand the nuances are many, and Basin 162 has a lot of those nuances. So this is something that's going to take a long time for us to get through as we try and get our basin more in line. You know, there's a lot of different things we have to consider. So I suggest everybody, if you have not, go through and read this.
Yeah, I'd like to agree with you. I think also a second reading could very well be helpful. I've done a second reading and it was extremely helpful because you have to absorb it and then you kind of have to reabsorb it. There's an impact there that's quite surprising. And I do believe that Nye County is truly affected by this decision. Thank you, Mr. Locke. Anybody else on the board? I'll close item 12 and move to item 13.
I have another question.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Mr. Locke.
This is directed to the manager. Where are we at with looking? Have we heard back from any law firms, from anyone about? Because it would be really good on an opinion to get an opinion from a law firm that would be representing us in regards to this and/or how we may move forward with certain things regarding this.
So, Mr. Locke, we've reached out to several at the direction of different board members and various advisors. We've reached out to 3 different law firms, including the previous. We are advertising. Those advertisements have just recently, it takes some time to get them posted and to get them accepted. They're just now getting on. We've received no response from those advertisements yet. I suspect it'll take at least 30 days before we do, if we get any response. Thus far, most of the work has been direct from the manager to various legal firms. I wanted to wait before an agenda item was brought before the board until we had allowed 30 days for advertising.
Did we ever get deliverables back from the last couple years of the water board for the previous firm?
I have a large deposit of paper documents from Shaw and from SEV of Kemper and Crowell. The contents of the documents I couldn't really get to. We just recently re-officed, so everything's a little bit mixed up, but we're working on it. It's difficult. There's a lot of paper to get through. So to answer your question, yes, we do have deliverables. What they are, I couldn't tell you.
Okay, well, it'd be nice to get to that when we have a time.
We'll get to it. It's a matter of getting through boxes.
Thank you. Anybody else? I'll close item 12. Item 13.
Item number 13 for possible action, discussion and deliberation to direct the general manager to coordinate with Nye County planning staff to develop a detailed report which outlines all currently accepted development agreements for subdivisions in Nye County and the number of actual parcels currently defined within those subdivision plans. Further, the report should identify the municipal water rights banked for each of the proposed subdivision parcels, as well as those already defined.
Who would like to open the conversation on the board to this one?
I will.
Well, if no one else is, I will. Anyone else want to go first?
Go ahead. Thank you.
You know, the impetus of this was that proof of beneficial use was really pushed in 2000, 15, 16, 17, 18, and we had a lot of water just being wasted across the county. Just, people pumping to show that their meter used it. And what it seemed to happen was people realized I can go bank this at utilities and then we don't have to prove the beneficial use. And so when I was on the water board at that time, what we tried to do is we passed a couple ordinances to prevent the moving back and forth, because water was being moved from, say, down by Turner to a mile north where a person had a really big well and could pump and prove beneficial use for this person a mile south, and then it was being sent back. And we said, wait a second, that's not proving beneficial use. You moved it, had somebody else pump it. And so we started putting restrictions as much as we could to prevent people from just holding on to their water rights and not really using them. So then when all these restrictions started going on, people got aware that you could just bank them with the utility, and the utility could say, well, we're holding them within our tariff area, so we don't, as a utility, we're not forced to approve beneficial use. So the real question is, we passed an ordinance that if you were going to change stuff from agricultural use, that it needed to be a 3-to-1 transfer, meaning you give up 3, and while giving up 3, you use 1. So like a 66% haircut, call it. And I have no idea if any of these water rights that were moved to the utilities ever had that haircut, if they were agricultural rights, and if these utilities have assigned those, did they take the haircut when they assigned them? And Commissioner Strickland might have more of an idea on what the development people have come before her saying, but what I've always seen is that developments come before and they say, well, here's our engineering plan. We're going to use 0.32 acre feet per house, and so that's how much water rights we're going to dedicate to this. Well, if those water rights were transferred 1-to-1 to the utility and they're being used at 0.3, that completely circumvented what the water district did in 2017. So without any of this knowledge, we don't even know where things sit.
I was going to ask for a point of clarification, Mr. Locke. You said if you had 4 water rights and you transferred them out from agriculture to, say, a private individual, private well, it was going to be 1 out of 4, right? So it'd be a 75% haircut. I mean, I'm just double checking the math. I mean,
it wasn't a 1-to-4. It was if you were moving them from an agricultural use to quasi-municipal, commercial, anything else, that you were going to give 3 water rights for the ability to use 1 of those 3.
Okay, so you're giving up 2 of the 3 that you put in there. You were able to use 1 of the 3. Okay.
Correct.
And was that just for domestic wells, or is that for going to like commercial uses?
It had nothing to do with domestic wells.
Okay.
It was just if you were turning it into quasi-municipal uses. The state engineer, and Commissioner Strickland might be able to clarify this, I think that they've said through the 1293 order that when you do buy those 2 acre feet, we are holding you to 500 gallons or less a day, and at some point we can come in and meter your well and do that. Commissioner, can you clarify that, or is that something that they've really stated, or something that they're holding people to?
Mr. Locke, Strickland here, STRICK It is, we're receiving letters back whenever the relinquishments are accomplished and done from the state engineer. The letter that comes back that's recorded says that you have relinquished 2 acre feet to drill a domestic well, but at any time, the state engineer can come in and make you only have the ability to use 500 gallons, as you stated, and put a meter on your well with the relinquishment. But at this time, they're allowing you to use the 2 acre feet as dedicated to the well, relinquished to the well.
Okay, but so Mr. Goodhart, to go through the numbers, so then if you're taking 2 acre feet, but you divide that by 500 gallons, they're actually only allowed to use 28% of their water if it came to that curtailment. So that would actually be less than what we did with the 3-to-1 transfer. Just again, going back to that word equity, you're trying to look at the differences. One's 33%, one's 28.
I have a question. So what you were talking about, so if somebody has some agricultural water rights and they transfer it to a utility, then a housing developer is going to build some houses. So it seems like the utilities have a huge amount of water rights on their books, but shouldn't of those, based on the 3-to-1, shouldn't a lot of those rights have been retired and not exist anymore?
Well, the 3-to-1, we didn't pass that till, and again, sometime around 2017. So give or take, could be 6 months. like if you're looking at Great Basin, they've had their water rights held with the two previous companies before it became called Great Basin, going way back. Most of those water rights have been held with that company for the parcels that already sit out there, throughout the valley that don't have water there because the system's not there. So they're holding those water rights, which should be attributed to parcels in different, if you go look at it, some places they're at 0.3, some places they're at 0.6, some places they're at 0.12. It would be nice for us to know what's attributed where, and are all those rights attributed, or are they held there? So that wasn't, I believe that most of the rights from Great Basin have been there for a long time. Again, that's why we want this information to see. Have they brought in 2,000 more acre feet from other agricultural uses recently that want them banked there? That's what we're trying to find out.
I think it's a great idea.
Any further questions by the board? Go ahead. Sorry, Mr. Locke. Could you pull the mic a little closer to you? Thank you.
Without the data, we can't do anything. We need to find data across the valley on all of this. We need to get a hold of all the data, and we need to then start making decisions based on having data. Without the actual data, we're just shooting in the dark. And, I want the board and I want Nye County residents to remember, we didn't create this problem. Nye County didn't have the ability to issue water rights. The state engineer had the ability to issue water rights. So if our basin's over appropriated, it was by the state engineer issuing too many water rights or allowing subsequent parcel maps to be done without water rights issued to them, which was the whole argument with 1293. But again, go ahead. Was somebody going to say something, or?
Yeah, I was. When water rights were first issued, was there any clarification of what you were able to do with those water rights? Were you able to use them? When did the process of selling water rights come into the picture? I don't know. I just am wondering. What are the guidelines of water rights, if any?
Well, again, I'm not an expert in this, so I'm not going to say, but I believe it's something to the effect that when people were going to farm 1 acre of land, they were giving something around 5 acre feet of water to farm that land. And this is going way back when. And I don't know that there was no state engineer who checked the recharge of the basin at the time. I don't think anybody was really doing the math on the other side of the equation. But that is just the knowledge that I've been told. I don't know if that's true.
Your math is right, Mr. Locke.
And it varies depending where in Nevada you're at. Some areas are 3 acre feet, some 4, some 5. And there was even a point of contention going back because underneath the DLE, Desert Land Entry, before they closed the basins, a guy could, apply for water rights to farm 120 acres. And back in those days, they called them acres of water rights. So you're able to actually farm all 120 acres. Well, somewhere along the line, the state decided, well, what is an acre of water rights? And that's where they came up with different water right quantities based upon the growing season and the temperature and elevation and what could be grown in different parts of Nevada. And there is a contention that in the Amargosa Valley and in Pahrump, if you wanted to grow alfalfa, you're not going to grow alfalfa on 5 acre feet per year, even with the most state-of-the-art low-pressure pivot system. You're probably going to be using closer to 6.5 or 7 acre feet. So there was even a question as to when the water rights were changed from acres to acre feet, was it done, scientifically or just, kind of out of hand? We're going to take a few of these acre feet off the table by doing it this way. But the water rights, I think, started being sold when they stopped appropriating new ones. So think about it, if you're in a basin that's not closed, you'd never want to buy a water right. You just make an application for a new water right. But once the basin engineer shut off the basin to new appropriations, that's when the ad hoc, whatever, private party, I need more water, you got it, I can't apply for more, so I got to buy it from someone who has it. So that's kind of the long and short of it.
Yeah, and to really explain it, Mr. Holden, to go back to why there was that 3-to-1, when we were trying to balance the basin in 2016-17 and get it closer to the, what everyone says is 20,000 acre-feet of recharge, which, again, where that data comes from, and if it's 22 or 18 or 25, I don't know for sure. That was always the number that has been used. When I sat down with the state engineer and discussed all this, it was anytime you looked at the chart of the water rights in the Pahrump Basin, the municipal rights were being used at about a third. The wells were not using their 2 acre-feet. They were using 350 gallons. So everybody was using a lot less than the 80,000 acre-feet that we had out there. The one user that could use their full water rights was the agricultural. And luckily for the Pahrump Basin, it doesn't pencil. It's not a good business model to do agricultural right now. Because if all those 15,000 acre-feet that are out there were being used, we'd have a real problem. If they were just pumping 15,000 acre-feet to do that. But since they're not being used and it doesn't seem to be the economics don't work, that was the one that we said, well, wait a second, you do have agricultural rights and we're not going to step on those rights. But if you want to sell those to make a profit to be used for something else in an over-appropriated basin, well, you're going to have to give up some of those because you're choosing to change the use. And that's where that all came from, just so you understand. Because if we could take the 15 down to 5, then it made it way easier to balance our basin. If that other 10,000 acre-feet was still sitting there, and not everyone's going to give them up for that reason. There are people that are going to continue farming, and there are, what that number is, if it's 1,000 acre-feet, if it's 1,500, we don't know until they're all being used or have been, appropriated to a utility or something to that nature. But that was the reason for that, because that was the one that they were choosing to change their use.
So when you're talking about the water to the utilities have about the 3-to-1, or the 1 out of 3, however you want to state it, at what point in time when you guys pushed that through in 2017, do you think that, so would there be difference? I'm just thinking from a utility perspective on water rights that were handed to them, say, in 2010 versus water rights that were banked with them subsequent to 2017? Or is it going to be like, okay, well, the agricultural went from, 3-to-1 now, pretty much everything the utility now has on their books is going to go from 3-to-1, or is it just subsequent to a specific date?
Well, again, there was a date where the water board passed an ordinance, which should have been upheld from that date moving forward. And then there's just the entire problem that we have to address. I mean, I think if somebody took the haircut after 2017, then they obviously did, those water rights would be looked at differently. But we don't have the data. And without the data to know, then, we're just guessing. So all we're asking for is the data.
Could we have a motion?
Can I ask another question before we have a motion? So when you talk about the utilities companies taking in new parcels, how was it handled that some of the parcels they were taking in potentially had the 2 acre-feet domestic water rights for some parcels, and where others didn't?
Do you have any knowledge on how that was handled?
Well, it's not, I don't think they took in 2 acre-feet domestic port. You know, when you file for a subdivision with the state engineer, you need to show them where you're getting your water. So when you file a map for a subdivision, which I believe is more than 4 lots, anything more than 4 lots would be considered a subdivision. You have to say we're getting the water from X and we're appropriating this many water rights for these. And then the subdivision map gets signed off. And so that's how, you know, the parcels are created. The subdivision maps have to be signed off by the state engineer. I believe I'm correct in that, Commissioner Strickland?
You are, and I think you're driving the point home, if I may, Mr. Locke, that in the 70s, those parcel maps were not signed off by the state engineer. So our problem exists now with all of the preferred equities, Calvada properties. Thank you.
Thank you.
And that's what I said at the beginning of this. We didn't create this problem. We have to deal with it. That's the unfortunate truth is other people just weren't doing what they probably should have, and now the problem's sitting in front of us. And it's not an easy solution. We don't just wave a wand and say, oh, we're taking away this person's and we're doing this and that, because, you know, there has to be an equitable way of trying to balance this basin. And that's not going to be an easy thing for us to do. At least from my vantage point, I think it's going to be very difficult. It's going to take a long time, and we're going to have to talk to as many stakeholders as we can, and we need to try and make this as fair as we possibly can.
Okay. I'm going to open public comment. Anybody that would like to speak on item 13? Seeing none, I'll close public comment, and I'll bring it back to the board. Is there a motion?
I think it's good to get the data before us. I don't know, you know, the complexity of the mission, but sounds like Michael Locke's kind of going to use some of his prior experience in the board to direct the general manager to coordinate a report. So I think we should get started on it and kind of see what you can come up with, you know, what roadblocks you're running into, and kind of get a better feel for it as we move on down the road. Exactly, you know, what type of information is voluntarily given to us, you know, just to try to get, like Mr. Locke said, get a handle on some of the data at this point in time.
So basically, the motion is to direct staff to follow the guidelines of the agenda item,
We'll just need a motion.
which is point specific. We have a motion. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Thank you. We have a motion, a second. Mr. Locke?
Aye.
Mr. Jackson? Mr. Holden?
Aye.
Mr. Goodhart?
Aye.
Mrs. Williams is aye. 5-0. Move to,
If I may, Madam Chair. Madam Chair, if I may. This item will take some time, so the board will need to express a little bit of patience. It'll take some time to come back before you.
oh, absolutely. I'm sure it'll take quite some time. Thank you. We'll move to item 14.
Item number 14 for possible action, discussion deliberation to renew a professional service agreement with Jameson Walker, Geosciences Consultant, for a not-to-exceed amount of $10,000 for fiscal year 22-23.
And what is the proposal? What work would they be performing?
Mr. Walker is a geoscientist, hydrologist to assist Mr. Klinke. This agreement, I believe you'll notice in your backup, only a very small portion due to the nature of the composition of the water board. A small portion of this fiscal year, or of the previous fiscal year's budget was expended. These items were just brought forward in order to maintain continuity of staff. You guys are going to be having a budget hearing coming up on the 9th that will allow you to ask questions to the specificity of what exactly each of these contracts are for. But what I can tell you is that Mr. Walker assists Mr. Klinke in developing answer to DV3 and various other functions of hydrology within Nye County.
So basically, this is a placeholder at this time. There's no specific action that would be assigned under a potential contract.
Yes, sir. His contract came due at the end of June. I was requested to put it on the agenda to bring it to you as soon as possible so that we could maintain that continuity of staff.
But this agenda item would allow him to continue to bill for work that he's continuing to do, is that correct?
Yes, basically what I would do with an approval of these three or one at a time, what I would do is take the previous year's contract, simply modify the fiscal year dates, and then I would ratify those as the general manager. Those contracts are within my threshold with your approval, of course. And then that would just allow Mr. Walker to continue with the work that he did last year moving forward. At the August budget workshop meeting, we could get into more specificity as to what he does and how and why and what. Those answers I don't necessarily have today.
Is there a motion? And it's okay, I'll open it for public comment. Seeing none, close public comment. And the direction for the board. Is there a motion?
I'll motion to approve Jameson Walker's not to exceed $10,000 professional services agreement for 22-23.
And a second?
Is there a monthly max on that or not really? I mean, theoretically, I'm not saying it would happen, but according to this, a guy could give us a bill for $10,000 for 1 month, but then he'd theoretically run out of.
Mr. Goodhart, it doesn't work like that. His work is by job. It's approved. It comes in, and as he moves through his cycle, he could not just bill us out for the entire amount. It's a project by project amount, and that $10,000 is for the entire fiscal year. In the previous year, I think he only spent $1,500. So I wouldn't expect that he would exceed that. Again, this is kind of a housekeeping measure just to maintain continuity of staff.
Is there a minimum under this contract that we'd have to pay?
Not that I've read.
Okay.
No, because this is all at the direction of the board.
Mm-hmm.
So we have staff under contract. There's 3 contracts we're going to be dealing with. We have staff under contract, and it's like a holding pattern.
Right. None of your contractors are going to be working without your direction.
Absolutely. Thank you. So is there a second to the motion? Pardon? Oh, I'm sorry. Thank you, Mr. Jackson. Motion and a second. Mr. Goodhart.
Calling for the question?
Calling for the question.
Aye.
Mr. Holden.
Aye.
Mr. Jackson. Aye. Mr. Locke.
Aye.
And Mrs. Williams, aye. That's 5-0. Thank you. Close item 14 and move to 15.
Item number 15 for possible action, discussion deliberation to renew a professional service agreement with Kathy Gilmore, the Quality Assurance Officer, for a not-to-exceed amount of $3,000 for fiscal year 22-23.
And again, this is the same type of contract?
Yes,
in the
ma'am.
sense that it's in a holding pattern and they work under the direction of the board. So is there a motion?
Question before, when you say quality assurance officer, that sounds like it's a government person.
So what the Quality Assurance Officer does is they review all of the science that your various contractors collect. She's qualified to say that it was gathered in the proper manner and can be accepted as actual data. Somebody like me can go out and measure all the wells I want, but if I don't collect that data in a specific manner on specific forms and bring that before a quality assurance officer, who then verifies that the person who gathered the data was qualified to do so, gathered it properly, and then logged it properly. So what Ms. Gilmore does is actually make sure that the science that we do is legitimate.
So she is a registered engineer, registered geologist, or?
She's a quality assurance officer, and what she's able to do is verify that any science that the Water District does or that Nye County's natural resources, that data is being collected according to proper procedures and best practice.
But is she have a state license for this? Is that a license?
I know that she's qualified to do her job, but I'm not familiar intimately with her background. But I do know that she is qualified as an assurance officer.
I'm not sure of the length of the time frame that she's worked for the county, or for the Water District, I should say. I believe it's been a few years, to say the least. These are
It is a vital
well over
service.
contracts for all three of these individuals have been with the Water District for quite a few years and have proven. Is there a motion?
I make a motion that we renew the professional services agreement with Kathy Gilmore for the not-to-exceed amount of $3,000 for fiscal year 2022 and 2023.
Is there a second?
I'll second the motion, but I'd like to see if there's any public comment.
Yes, certainly. We have a motion and a second. May I take the vote and then ask for public comment?
I'd like to hear the public comment before the vote.
Okay, we'll open the public comment. Anybody that would like to speak on this agenda item? Seeing none, I'll close public comment. I'll poll the board. Mr. Goodhart,
Aye.
Mr. Holden,
Aye.
Mr. Jackson, Mr. Locke,
Aye.
Mrs. Williams, aye. 5-0. Close item 15 and move to item 16.
Item number 16 for possible action, discussion deliberation to renew a contract for the professional services of Dwight Smith, the principal hydrologist with McGinley and Associates Incorporated, to provide third-party review of the most recent USGS water model impacting the larger Amargosa Valley geographic areas and the ongoing Devil's Hole debate for fiscal year 22-23.
If I may just comment, Mr. Smith was the hydrologist that the last board requested the study. He did make a presentation to the Water District. I believe Commissioner Strickland was present at the time also, and he was the one that explained to us that basically the water level has come back up and in compliance with USGS's study, but that actually it's a little better than what USGS was looking at. So there is an impact on that USGS study. His presentation was very, very good and very clear, and he has again been contracted to the Water Board for quite a few years.
I noticed there isn't a dollar figure on this. Why is that?
On his previous expense, that was an error made at my desk in composition.
Microphone.
I believe it's $10,000.
Well, I think then the motion would have to include a dollar amount.
It should be in your backup. I apologize.
Mr. Goodhart has my copy. Thank you. I believe it is $10,000. Actually, that was 2021. Okay, here we go.
I'd like to point out, Chair, that there is no room for changing the agenda item to reflect the $10,000 unless you're confident it's in the backup, and I'm sure you are. If you're confident it's in the backup, it cannot be part of the motion. The only other opportunity you have is to re-agendize it with the amount. Thank you.
The item is agendized, number 17.
And I have the contract in front of me, and the contract does show that the estimated cost for the total was $38,350, but you have to remember that a portion of that has already been spent, and I'm not sure that this, is there time to bring this back to the next meeting?
Yes, ma'am. I believe we had an agenda, of course, we had a meeting issue. The previous agenda did not include that, and this agenda item actually does include the $10,000 previous expending, and his contract is in the backup.
Yeah, and actually, these pages aren't numbered, and that's one of the things we need to start doing if we could. It does say that will not exceed $50,000 or the cost of professional services, whichever is the lesser. So that's the contract. If the board would like to bring this back, we can do that, and I think it'd be more effective if we do bring it back at the next meeting, and that way there'll be no question to it. I'm sorry, staff.
I understand.
So I will
Since
go
the
ahead
next
and
meeting is
close.
only-
Can you do me a favor? And
since-
Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Mr. Locke, I'm sorry.
Well, the next meeting's only a couple weeks away, so I think we should get the specifics in here so that we can, make a motion the way we would like.
Yes, Chair, can you make a motion to continue it to the August 9th meeting, please?
That's just what I was about to do. I will take item 16 and close it with the direction that we will bring it to the agenda on Tuesday, August 9th.
Can I get some specificity as to what you would like to see in that agenda item that's not in this one?
Well, the contract is in the board packet, and I think that the board members need to take the time to re-review the contract. And with that being said, that it'd be very similar agenda item to 14 and 15, where it shows the amount not to exceed.
Understood.
Is that the pleasure of the board?
Yes.
Thank you. Item 16 is closed. Move to item 17, please.
We've completed 17. We completed 17 at the beginning.
Oh, I apologize. Yes, we did. We can move to 18. I apologize.
Supporting reports, organization member, staff, and county liaison, number 18. Ms. Liaison?
All right, I'm awake here. There is within this supporting report are board reports from both the Las Vegas Valley Water District and Southern Nevada Water Authority. We don't have anybody that is reporting to us on that specifically, and I have no report to give you on that. As the liaison for the Central Nevada Rural Water Authority, I'd like to make a request, if you would consider it, board, to ask Jeff Fontaine to bring your next report on the 9th, since I have nothing to report today and there'll be some work done between now and then. And he is the executive director to the CNRWA, and he can get you a lot of good information. You'll be able to ask questions of him at that time.
Would you make contact with Mr. Fontaine, please, and request that he can do that report? I believe he can, well, he can't call it in, can he?
Of course he can.
No, we don't have that available.
He can't call in.
We have no call-in. That's why we're not taking calls from the public.
I understand.
Not available.
I can coordinate with Mr. Fontaine and see if he can participate in person, and if he's not, then I'll coordinate with Nye County staff to make accommodations of some kind of call-in.
Or even a written report.
Written report.
Yes,
The
ma'am.
reason I'm requesting that is I will not be here on the 9th.
Good to know. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Written report will be fine. Thank you so much. Thank you. Item B.
As far as general, I'm working with Nye County staff right now on an overall report to the county commission. My intention was to be a little more prepared with a report on this agenda for you. Unfortunately, due to some circumstances and moving some offices and some equipment changes, we haven't been 100%. That being said, we have made a lot of ground as far as the office goes. The new computer has been recently installed as of yesterday. The Xerox machine, with your vote this afternoon, will allow a refresh there. Essentially, all of the Water District's equipment has been updated in the 2 months since we've started, or since I've started. We've made a lot of ground with Nye County administration and the training schedule. Obviously, we've had a couple of bumps here this morning. I continue to train with Ms. Tackett, but I believe following the August meeting, I will be out of that dense training, and I will be hopefully more present to you and the board. All systems are good. I would be less than 100% honest if I wasn't a little disappointed with the progress that I've been able to make. That being said, according to the board and other observers, we're doing good. I would say that the Water District is struggling to operate at 25 hours on one staff member. I'm working more than that right now, but I believe that in the long run, once training is down, we'll be able to handle it at our current capacity, that further staffing isn't necessary yet. It's been a challenge, but it's, I believe, one that we're winning. And that would be the end of my report.
Thank you. Close item 18 and move to item 19.
Item 19, possible action, discussion and deliberation to set the date, time, and location of the next Water District Governing Board meeting for Monday, August 9, 2022 at 10 a.m. at the BOCC chambers.
August 9th is a Tuesday.
Yes, ma'am, and not a Monday.
Is the board comfortable with August 9th, Tuesday? We're more or less regularly scheduling the second Tuesday of the month for our regular monthly meetings to get us fully on board. So
I would ask manager to reach out to Commissioner Carboni to see if he's available for that meeting, please.
To fill in, yes, ma'am.
Thanks.
thank you. No further comments. I'll close item 19 and move to item 20.
That was an action item. You'll have to take public comment, and there'll have to be a motion from the board.
And a vote.
Yep.
Move back to item 19 and reopen. And is there any public comment on item 19, moving the Water District Governing Board meeting to Tuesday, August 9th, 2020 at 10 a.m.? No, seeing no public comment, I'll close public comment. Is there a motion from the board? Anybody?
I will motion, this is Mr. Locke, I'll motion to have the next Water District Governing Board meeting for Tuesday, August 9th, 2022 at 10 a.m.
Is there a second?
I'll second the motion.
Thank you, Mr. Holden. Motion and second. Mr. Goodhart?
Aye.
Mr. Holden?
Aye.
Mr. Jackson?
Aye.
Mr. Locke?
Aye.
Mrs. Williams, aye, 5-0. Close item 19 and move to item 20.
Closing general public comment. Up to 3 minutes time limit per person. Action will not be taken on matters considered during this period.
Is there anyone in the public that would like to speak? Is there anyone in Tonopah? Seeing none. None in Pahrump. I'll close public comment. Item 21.
Board comments. This item is limited to announcements and to propose future workshops or agenda items and should not revisit matters addressed during the meeting.
Any board member have anything?
Yes. Instead of just having the chair pick a meeting date, can we come up with a plan for future meetings? You know, for example, the third Thursday of the month or some kind of...
That's exactly what I was doing, Mr. Holden, and that's why the second Tuesday was picked, was because it's not just this board that meets here. There's many, many boards that meet here. So when you pick a time frame, we need to be consistent throughout the month, throughout the year. We need to be considerate of the amount of staff that will be available if we need any assistance or any backup. doing the meeting between the two commissioner meetings, the first Tuesday and the third Tuesday of the month, has fit into a pattern that probably will be acceptable to everybody kind of under the umbrella of the county, with advertising. There's so many aspects that come together to bring these meetings together. And so we have to be consistent, but also we have to consider the general public as a priority. And the priority for the general public usually is they want to know consistency. Is the board meeting going to be, for example, the commissioners, the first and third Tuesday of every month of the year? So they know that at 10 o'clock they can show up here on any given Tuesday, first and third, and know that they're going to be visiting the commissioners' meeting. And so in choosing the second Tuesday of the month is what, when staff checked to see what was available in time frame, fit into that scenario. But if the board would like to change that, then let's, I guess, put it on the agenda for some discussion if that's what the board wants. But it's very awkward to pull all of the different entities together to bring this board into what already exists. And we're kind of at the end of the line because we haven't been meeting on a regular basis. We haven't even been meeting for over a year. And so we're kind of fitting in around everybody else that uses the facility. Correct?
Yes, ma'am. And just as a consideration from the board members, by scheduling the second Tuesday, it allows the Nye County Commission to make action or ask of you. It allows the manager to then, it doesn't leave a lot of time, but in a pinch, I can agendize action from the first meeting from the Nye County Commission, get it before you, you can deliberate, and then I can bring it back to the commission within a month. So by holding the water board's meetings on the second Tuesday, it creates a pinch, but it also creates a lot of flexibility as far as action on the part of the water board and action on the part of the Nye County Commission, and I think that's what we're here to do. So, yes, we could be flexible and move the meetings around every month and try to accommodate everyone's schedule, or we could just say we're going to hold these meetings on the second Tuesday of every month. And then everybody knows, staff knows when the meeting is, you know when the meeting is, the public knows when the meeting is, and it does create some consistency for my desk. I don't mean to be, self-serving here, but it also serves the public, and I believe it will ultimately serve the board.
Any other comments from the board members?
It looks like that I would make a motion that we would convene at that point in time, or I'd say aye.
There's a motion. Is there a second?
A motion to what, please? We don't have an agenda item to motion to.
Okay.
Sorry.
This is just comments.
Right.
Thank you. I apologize.
Is it too late for me to make that request to have an action item for the next?
That's what it's for.
Yeah, okay.
Go ahead.
And that was underneath this one, right? Yeah, I was going to ask our manager there, see if we can get an invitation of the basin engineer, Basin 230, to come out there and give us a little bit more of a clear perspective on it, what exactly that Order 1330 will entail or will have on the Valley movement of water rights.
Staff is clear.
Any other board member?
Yeah, I have a comment. To try and keep things just like we're trying to do with the second Tuesday, I think for all of our action items, what I'd like to see is the general manager give us a background, if any is necessary, allow our board to discuss it, then ask for public comment, and then make our motion. And I think we just need to get some continuity on how we handle each one of these so that we're able to discuss it amongst ourselves because we've read the background, gone through this, then hear what the public comment has to say. And I just like to see each action item kind of go the same direction. as far as when we ask for public comment, I'd like to hear from the general manager on these items and get their synopsis of it, and then hear from the board members.
And thank you, Mr. Locke, because that's the direction we were going last month. But it appears that with this agenda item, I've got things coming from the left and the right and from wherever. So that is the direction I would like to go, because I believe that you have a discussion, you open the agenda item, you have a discussion, and you bring in public comment so that there are people out there that can bring good things to the board. Good comments that may be interjected into a motion. So that will be the direction of this chair. Thank you, Mr. Locke.
Okay, yeah, so I would make that direction to basically tell Mr. Weeks that when you're done reading the action item, the first thing is we would like to hear from you. And if you have nothing to add, then defer to us to add ours, and then we will ask for that public comment. And I'd like the manager to kind of stay on that with each action item to make sure that we just follow down that road. So that's just my comment on what I think would make these run more efficiently, and we would get a better understanding of each one of these items.
Mr. Locke, I understand your process. I think it's absolutely reasonable. I think the chair's thinking on the same line. If there's been any disruption or interruption, I would take full responsibility for those. We're just training up, and we'll make sure that this is the process that we move forward with. We thank you for your suggestion.
Thank you. Any other board members have any items for board comments? I'll close item 21. Go ahead.
I'd like to welcome Mr. Jackson to the board. Thank you for serving.
Thank you, Mr. Locke.
Thank you. And again, welcome. Thank you very much. I forgot my manners. I apologize. Thank you very much, Mr. Locke. We are adjourned. Yeah. And he's already spent a portion of that, but we need to know what the portion is. Yeah, yeah. And when we have our budget discussion, we'll be able to get those actual numbers. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah, that's my hard copy. I'll print up another one, no problem. You go to the website and you press on the agenda item.
Will you guys hold position for a few minutes? I need to get a document for you. So if you press on the agenda item, then you can
Press on that, click on that, and that brings up the actual document.
What I was doing is I was doing this without the backup.
Right, and
Right.
that's what you'll get.
Right.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
so by pressing this, I can
Each
back up.
agenda item is highlighted and you click on it and it comes up beautiful. Thank you so much for your help. I appreciate it. Today I had everybody coming from different directions and he was very good with his presentation. I was very impressed. And it was interesting because USGS kind of have Devil's Hold down, and he showed that it was up and up and.
What they said was that what they did is they said that it should have gone up.
Yeah.
They said we didn't go up as much as it should have, therefore it's still going down, even though it's going up. The
Exactly.
level's going down because without pumping, it would have gone up more.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It
And during
was-
the driest period, during a 1,200-year mega drought, they're saying that the level should have gone up more.
Should have gone up
And
more.
so the fact that it went up a little bit means that it's actually going down.
Yeah.
It's like you have to think to yourself, how, yeah,
How is that feasible?
Well, it's like Biden
There's no
saying,
logic
okay,
to it.
gas was $5, but now it's $4.30, so he wants to take a victory lap
Yeah.
for bringing gas prices down. And he's probably gonna do the same thing with,
He'll do it again.
he'll do the same thing
He'll
with
do it again.
inflation. He'll say, hey, I
Yes.
brought inflation down to only 8%.
Absolutely.
Because it used to be 9.5. So now you
Absolutely.
gotta go ahead and give me a pat on the back, because I brought inflation down to 8%. You say, well, wait a
Absolutely.
minute. It was 2.5% when you took office, so.
Yeah.
No, but a recession is based more upon 2 successive quarters of GDP. They have a new definition for recession.
Isn't this interesting?
Yeah.
Helene, I just wanted
Thank you. Let me turn this one off too.
that,
do.
That's most of the work.
And it's already done.
Right, the work's
It's already there.
been chopped.
Yeah. And then find out what the current water rights are today.
That's what you all tasked me with today, is a huge mountain of,
Yeah.
but what you're saying is maybe most of that wood's already been chopped.
Most of that's already been done. So sometimes I don't understand the lingo, so as I go
Right.
along, if you're like, hey, because sometimes I may say something, and it's like, yeah, that's what we need, or no, that's not what we're talking about, because it's your perception of looking at it one way, it's my perception of looking at it one way. You know, up is, okay, you might get somebody, okay, go up, okay, well, how high? And it's like, wait a second, that's not what I told you, I just said go up. You know?
Right.
But then somebody stops along the way and says, so there's many things. This is my favorite.
You were quiet.
I was very quiet.